Um, Thank you everyone for joining. We'll just begin the session since we have already a few people in the session waiting. Okay. Um, Thank you. Today, the session we've kind of curated for you. It's based on a topic that's we felt was quite relevant to the fellowship community and also the youth at large. And we thought to do it in a YF Talks format. I am Farhan. I'm a part of the YF Talks initiative, and I have my team Anirudh, Chanmukha, Deepak, Kashwar doing this to kind of bring you a session where we could provide a safe space and promote a dialogue around a growing impact of the social impact ecosystem, right? So I'll just briefly touch upon the YF Talks initiative. So it's a program or it's an initiative that we started somewhere in 2019 fellowship year, and what we tried to do was to bring together stories and experiences of fellows and kind of promoted community-centric participation of the fellows during that year. So it was to kind of have a platform where fellows can come together, they can talk about their stories and with the fellowship community at large. And it was kind of modeled on the TED Talks kind of a format. Now, after that year, we've again revived the initiative, and this time we're focusing on more of an online kind of a format. And today it's more of a panel discussion. And again, as I mentioned, the panel discussion is trying to focus on the social impact sector for today. So what we're going to do is like now again to put things into perspective, social impact ecosystem has kind of drastically grown over these years, right? Like when we look back in the sector 10, 15 years back, so for example, we didn't know if there's such a thing that exists, like maybe banking sector, insurance sector, or any other maybe area of work. But today, I think the scenario is very different. And to kind of partly understand this, I think there's a demand side to the story and there's a supply side. The demand side again is related to the huge variety of problems that we see around us, right? Whether it's in education, healthcare, urban planning, climate change, and given that, I think United Nations, when it kind of put together the standards, sustainable development goals for all countries, there was a need for specialized organizations, dedicated organizations and individuals to come together and solve for these problems. So that was the demand side. I think from the supply side, I think it's largely related to us, the youth of the country, and also other professionals who felt they can commit to these problems in the sense they can come together and practically solve for these problems. And I think social impact kind of gives that opportunity. The ecosystem gives that opportunity now. So it's both sides. Like I think it's working from both sides. But again, when you are trying to enter into this space, there could be some conceptions and preconceived notions around it, like what this sector is about, right? To give a very simple example, I think so. When I sometimes go to my relative's place or any extended family place, sometimes when I'm asked the question what I do, I try to my answer is supposed to be that okay, I work with this impact consulting firm called Satwa, which does strategy and implementation for social impact programs, and it works with non-profits, philanthropists, government, and so on. But I have to break that down because people might not very well follow it. And then in the end, sometimes I get the response that, okay, we get it. So you work in an NGO, right? And I'm like, no, no, I don't work in an NGO. But again, I think from an outsider perspective, it could be difficult to distinguish between the actors, the stakeholders who work in this ecosystem and how they interact, how they solve for problems, and what are these nuances, of being a development sector practitioner. So today, to kind of burst some misconception, to answer some questions, and to provide a more deeper understanding, we have some of my batchmates and friends who have worked in this space after their fellowship, and they're going to talk about from a very personal experience, but also from a professional experience that they've had, and we will try to navigate some of these questions that you might have through them. So without further ado, I'll just like to introduce our moderator for today, Anirudh Pendiela. And Anirudh, again, he's a friend and he is a fellow batchmate and part of the YIF Talks team, right? So today he'll be taking us through these discussions. And without like further ado, I'll just hand it over to Anirudh. Over to you.
Hey Farhan, thanks a lot for the introduction and for covering up the entire spotlight to a greater extent, and making all of our lives easier in order to understand how it is and why we are having this particular conversation today. Before we begin, a quick introduction about myself. My name is Anirudh. I am a part of the Young India Fellowship cohort 2019. Currently, I'm working with Michael Page International in the capacity of an associate recruitment consultant. I'm based out of Bangalore at the moment, and I come up with an engineering background, like yes, even I don't know what am I doing after doing engineering right now in life, but sure, I guess that's the boat all of us probably are sailing right now. Um, just to give a quick brief as to why a person who is not associated with the industry is actually moderating this session is a pretty self-explanatory thing in itself, given the fact that we wanted to present an entirely outside view when we are talking about what is the industry and what are the different nitty-gritties that is associated with the industry to a great extent, right? That is where I come into picture. Someone who's working in the corporate industry, cutthroat competition, like a lot of my friends like to call it, right? That is where I come in from. So understanding the mindset, understanding the ideology behind all of my fellow batchmates and a couple of my close friends who had been working in the industry is something that is completely new to me as well. So that is the reason why we are here. Let me not waste further time. Let me quickly introduce all of our panelists who are a part of the discussion today. Let me begin by talking about Ankita. Ankita is, again, I don't think I'll have to do it again and again. All the four of us, I mean, all the five of us, and mostly all of the people who are associated here are from the Young India Fellowship cohort of 2019. So Ankita comes with a background in engineering from IIT Delhi, who later worked with management consulting in the capacity of a consultant at Deloitte, later moved to Young India Fellowship. Ankita is currently working as a young professional with Niti Aayog, specifically towards the Atal Innovation Mission project. Well, of course, we're going to get into the details further on, which is the reason why we have the entire session as such. Welcome aboard, Ankita. Thanks a lot for accepting our request and getting on board for this call. Quite frankly speaking, we had quite intense discussions when we were preparing for the entire discussion as well before. Let me quickly move on to the other panelist and rather the other IITian as well on the panelist. I'd like to invite Chirag as well as the second panelist for our discussion today. Chirag comes with a background of engineering, rather a dual degree from IIT Kharagpur, post which he has joined the fellowship. Then he has done the Mother Teresa Fellowship, and now he's currently working with Pradhan on the grassroots level. I guess he's currently based out of Madhya Pradesh on the grassroots level, working towards specific issues that again he's going to talk about. Who would be the better person to actually get onto that? Speaking about working with grassroots and community building, we have the third panelist, which is Naman Jain. Naman comes with a background in economics. Naman, hi. Yes. Naman comes with a background in economics from Delhi University, a fresh grad who joined the Young India Fellowship class of 2019, post which he went on to pursue the CMGGA, the Chief Minister's Good Governance Associate Program of Ashoka University. Yes, he is the one who continued for 2 years with Ashoka. Then, who is currently working in the impact consulting space as a consultant with GDI Partners. And of course, let's talk about it going forward as to what is that he specifically does, and he's the one who can talk about it better on, right? We have the final panelist with us, who's Kavya, who comes with a background in history from Delhi University, further joined the Young India Fellowship, and currently she's working with Niranta Trust, where she specifically targets and works with adolescent girls and again pre-adolescent children in specific areas of expertise, which is again what we're going to talk about going forward. So we have a diverse slash not so diverse panelists right now with us, not so diverse in terms of the education background when we talk about it. So let me quickly begin with into the panel discussion bit of it, where I'd like to invite Naman first to talk about. Okay, Naman, help us understand. So development sector for us at a great stretch is, again, I don't want to sound too laymanish, but that is what it is right now. What Farhan has mentioned, what his extended family also talks about. For a general third perspective, right? If we talk to our parents or any of our extended family members, if we say we're working in the development sector, it essentially ends up them asking us, are we working in an NGO? How are we making money, right? Two different things. So of course, working in the development sector in itself is not an it's not an absolute entity altogether, right? So why don't you walk us through probably what are the different probably disciplines and subsectors in the development sector, and few examples if you can throw us so that we can understand about the organizations that are associated with it. Naman.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Anirudh. As you rightly pointed out, right, there's a narrow view of development sector which currently exists among the general target population. So let me pull up a presentation just to decode what we mean when we say what that we are working in development sector and what are various parts and aspects to the sector as a whole, so that the audience also gets a taste of what the sector includes and what kind of functions various organizations are performing. Right. So let me start with just introducing what the development sector really means, right? So development sector, the term development sector is essentially a very broad term which is used to refer to individuals and organizations who are specifically focused towards creating impact with terms of social indicators. These social indicators can be in sectors like health, for example, in reducing the anemia in women. It can be in education space, for example, improving learning levels and pass percentage of students. It can be in income equality, for example, bridging, improving income of certain class of the society, and etc. Right. So whenever we talk about an organization in the development sector, its DNA basically consists of four parts. First is what are they offering, uh, what kind of value add are they adding to the sector as a whole. Second is how they are set up as an organization, right? What are the internal mechanisms, how they are structured, etc. Third one is what is their area of work, what are their core competencies, and what kind of functions they expertise in. Fourth is the type of customer and type of client base that they offer their services to, and what it entails. So based on these four parameters, the DNA of organization is really defined. If we go into the details of it, then in terms of offering, and a development sector organization can either offer a product like let's say an edtech platform, or it can be a database management software, etc. Or they can offer some sort of service like program management services. They might advise certain clients, or they might conduct monitoring and evaluation of some existing or ongoing projects. So these are two types of broad offerings which a development sector organization does offer. When we move to organization setup, then in broad terms, it can have two type of entities, right? They can be the private entities. When we say private entities, they include both for-profit and not-for-profit entities. This sounds a little weird to most of the people. In the development space, are there for-profit entities as well? The answer is yes. There are a lot of for-profit entities in the development sector, which want to contribute towards the society and make an impact. Then when we come to public entities, they are mainly government think tanks like NITI Aayog, and there are also some multilaterals which exist. If we talk about area of work, then broadly, I've tried to list down the specific areas that these organizations can work in. They can be either a part of their focus can either be research, for example, what JPAL does. They can be a consulting firm, for example, what GDI does. They can do some sort of advocacy, what Center for Civil Society do, and they can do other kinds of stuff like evaluation, helping the client with the implementation of a certain project. They can help the government in policy making, and etc. Now, if we talk about the customer base of these organizations, or who they really work with, so it can again be of various types, right? Some people only work with private organizations, others work with politicians, funders, NGOs, governments, and etc. So this is how a DNA of a development sector organization is really formed. Now let's pick up two things and let's briefly discuss some examples of these organizations. So we'll pick up the right hand side things, which are organization setup and areas of work. So this is just a simple 2x2 matrix to understand what are some of the organizations that lie at the intersection of these things. So for example, in organization setup, if you pick up fellowships, right? So we know LAMP is a fellowship. LAMP fellows mainly work with the legislature to work on policy documentation, policy briefs, etc. Right? But if you go to a program like CMGGA, they work mainly on design and implementation with the executive branch of our democracy, right? Similarly, if we move to, let's say, NGOs or philanthropists, then Pradhan is an NGO which works with design and implementation of various aspects on the ground. Whereas, KEF works in the education space, and they're also an NGO. If we move to philanthropists, then if you go down to the funding aspect of it, then BMGF, which is Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, or MSDF, Michael Susan Dell Foundation, these are these are philanthropy organizations. They support other organizations in running the programs. These organizations don't run the programs themselves. They just support other programs. They just support other partners to scale up or to start something as a pilot as well. Then there are some research-based for non-for-profits as well, who are more focused towards creating leveraging existing literature, creating more literature to advocate certain policy reforms or other reforms in the sector. So an example of such is JPAL, right? But if you move to for-profit, which is a new development in the development sector itself, as Farhan mentioned, that development sector has really grown in the last 10-15 years. So for-profit sector has also developed in these 10-15 years only. So if we talk about design and implementation, there are mainly big fours which are present in the sector. Their main work is not development sector as such, but they have certain wings who work with governments and other impact-oriented leaders as well. Then there is GDI who works on design and implementation. Then there is Samagra, Dalberg, etc. If we move to monitoring and evaluation, so what monitoring and evaluation means is that a program is already running, but how do you define whether it has been impactful or not? So there are some specific firms who focuses on monitoring and evaluation of these programs. The examples are ID Insight, Samboodhi, GMI, which is Grey Matters India, etc. And yeah, if we move to multilaterals, then UNDP and WHO are multilaterals at the international level who come up with certain programs, and they also design and implement these programs. So I would like to mention here that all of these organizations that you can see on the screen, they don't work in silos, right? They work with each other, and they collaborate with each other to run certain programs. Sometimes they work on their own, but for a lot of programs, they also work together to create meaningful impact. So yeah. So that gives us a broad overview of how sector looks like in general. Back to you.
I think the hosts have the ultimate power in us in order to ensure who's going to talk and who's not going to talk. Great. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Naman. Thanks a lot for explaining the entire thing on a broader aspect. Now, before getting into the details of what each of you do on a day-to-day basis, why don't we take a step back and try to understand what was it that motivated you to join the industry in the first place? What is your journey? What is the personal story that you share in terms of getting into the industry, and what basically, so how is it that you are inclined towards this particular industry, right? I'm pretty sure this answer is not a simple one-worder, but let's try to do that, right? Why not? That is what we all learned at the end of the day. Ankita, why don't we start with you? You work with the government of India. I mean, that's what I am understanding. You work with the government of India. So how did it all happen? So was this idea right from the beginning, or why don't you tell us about it?
Right. Thanks a lot, Anirudh, and actually thanks to the entire team for this particular initiative in the first place. So you're absolutely right. There is not one thing that sort of got me into this sector, or I identified one thing. It was actually a combination of a lot of factors that led to me being here right now. And I think it was more of an elimination process that, I identified, okay, these are the things that I don't like, rather than a selection process and knowing that this is the one thing that I want to do. So I think it started in my college, and so I didn't even know what the social sector is in the first place. I didn't know it existed, and I just had a very, very vague inclination towards working in the education sector, because I felt that education is the reason that I am where I am. So I want to ensure that that privilege sort of extends to everybody. A very, very vague idea, but so I can probably pin it down to three things that sort of led me here. First thing, I realized very early on, let's say in my second year itself, that chemical engineering is not my deal. Cannot do it, will not pursue it. Then the second thing that happened is I started interning in a lot of corporates just to see how that feels like, and I realized that I was not very inclined towards working to build incremental solutions to problems faced by people who are already very resourceful. Like, that just did not drive me, and I realized like that's not my thing, and I did not like the rigidity with which these corporates function. All of the verticals are very rigid, and I didn't enjoy the culture. The third thing that happened, thankfully, is that IIT Delhi actually has a very wonderful humanities department. So I took up a lot of courses in that department, and one of the courses that moved me a lot was called Selected Studies in Public Policy by Professor Richa Kumar. And that's when I realized that like opened me up to the entire world of public policy and introduced me to the kind of challenges that exist and the kind of thinking and analysis that goes into solving these problems. And I was like, yes, this is somewhere that I really want to work in. And so that, yeah, that's how I'm here. I just also want to quickly mention that I mean, by working in this sector, we're not really doing a favor to anybody. The only people we're doing a favor to is ourselves, because we like doing this work, we enjoy doing this work. So yeah, just a disclaimer on that.
Thank you, Ankita. I guess you have already clarified it right at the beginning. I don't think we have to wait till the end towards discussing this particular aspect of it. Now, talking about creating an impact and talking about working on the ground, talking about changing the societal aspect of a particular aspect, we have Chirag here, who is in fact working with Pradhan right now. Also, before this, he was a Mother Teresa Fellow. So, Chirag, why don't you tell us about how did the transformation from an IIT Kharagpur to working with Pradhan in the grassroots, rural part of India, how did that happen? Chirag, one second. I'm so sorry. I guess hosts. I guess you have to unmute.
Okay, so now am I audible? So as Ankita said, it was not one decision, but the decisions taken over a period of time. So since the time of KGP to Young India Fellowship, it was more about exploration, like exploring different options which were available rather than just the electronics which I had as my undergrad. Then in fellowship, when I joined fellowship, it was more about experiencing the options which were available to me. So good chunk of fellowship, I remember the initial 6 to 7 months, it was more about experiencing what were the courses which were on offer there, what are the different opportunities which were given. And then there was one of my ELMs with Rajiv Gandhi Mahila Vikas Pariyojana in UP, where I got a first-hand experience of working at the grassroots. So in the latter half of fellowship, somewhere around January, February, I narrowed down to a couple of options. One was in education sector, while one was in proper development sector, but both were at grassroots because of my certain inclination towards grassroots. As I believe I need to learn from scratch to later get into policy making. So the two organizations which I shortlisted were more or less Pradhan and Azim Primji Foundation. And then one of those two happened and I got into Pradhan. So this was how I get into Pradhan. There was the support of Mother Teresa Fellowship too, which made my decision to get into the sector easier. But the decision when I took to get into Pradhan, Mother Teresa Fellowship was not in the frame. So it came in at later stage. So I think over a period of time, it's more about my learnings from my past life, the upbringing and the experiences, which I believe had led me to take this decision of working at grassroots for a couple of years. I guess that was audible.
Yes, Chirag. Thanks a lot for that. Great. Now moving on, why don't we talk about Kavya? Kavya, you work in a very specific section, a very specific role that deals with one particular beneficiary factors, right? In the country's dynamics that we can talk about. So why don't you tell us, how did the journey towards Niranta happen?
Thank you for this question. It's such a trip down memory lane and it's bringing up all those moments. So, and it's quite similar to what Ankita and Chirag have said so far. And I think it all began in second year of undergrad. Being a history student, you feel extra pressure of figuring out what you're going to do if you're not becoming an IAS or not studying for the exams. You're like, okay, what else? And so far, I had only been thinking of the next step because that felt comfortable and I felt confident in that. But at this moment, when I was looking for postgraduate courses and other things, I had to introspect and think about what do I need to do. And in a conversation, I realized that the only thing I would really be happy doing would be working with women. And that slowly evolved into the idea of working in the field of gender. But that was still pretty vague. I mean, what is gender? What is the field of gender? How do you work in gender? And I think the fellowship played a role here because I met a lot of people who'd already been working, lots of great professors, lecturers, and just a pretty good exposure to what could, possibly be working in gender. And that's how it started. Once the fellowship was ending, again the panic, ooh, what next? And as someone who's going to work for the first time, it's a very strange feeling to be entering a field you know very little about, or hear very little about, because development sector isn't talked about much. And I think that the network, I mean, we all talk about network in Ashoka. So the network of our, my alumni mentor, my ELM client who was also an alum, and all of my friends and a lecturer I met through a class. And so that process really got me. I got to know about Niranta. And yeah, I'm here. Niranta works in, as you said, we work with women, girls from marginalized communities mostly.
Great, Kavya. Definitely, you did cover upon the YF aspect as well, which is definitely something that goes at the back of most of our minds right now, right? How did it come into the picture here? Yes, Naman, of course, you made it very clear that you're working with GDI along with the presentation having a watermark there, but sure. And before this, you were associated with CMGGA right after Ashoka. And even at Ashoka, I mean, of course, I know about it, but yes, you also had your own ELM project, which also was in the sector, right? So was it you always were interested in the sector, or how is it like? How did it all start? Why don't you tell us about it?
Thank you, Anuj. Actually, at the first glance, it seems like I came into the sector by chance, but retrospectively thinking about it, there were some threads and there were some, nudges which pushed me into the sector. It actually started with during my undergraduation when I joined with a think tank called Center for Civil Society. So the first project in itself was understanding the government to citizen services and how they function and what kind of gap that exists during that system. So that was my first interaction with the government officers, for things other than getting driving license made or getting any other certificate made, when we were actually understanding what are the problems that they face. So then decided to come to YF to get a sense of various subjects and various sectors, because I felt till the graduation my perspective was a little limited. So YF helped in generating that perspective. We had a lot of courses, and specifically courses like law and economics, where we talked about how to optimize public infrastructure system. That really interested me. So that naturally I got pushed into the sector, and I started exploring what are the opportunities that exist. And I came across this this opportunity called CMDJ program, which you also mentioned in the beginning. CMDJ program is basically Chief Minister's Good Governance Associate. It's run by Haryana government along with Ashoka University. So where the idea is that one young professional is placed at every district along with the deputy commissioner to help and support the deputy commissioner in some of these programs. So during that program, got a lot of insight into how government functions, what governance consultancy is, how large-scale development projects are actually, thought about, they are designed, and how they are actually implemented on the ground. So during that space, I actually got very interested into this whole sector, and I actually got to know that governance consultancy is also a thing, and people make careers in the sector. So yeah, so after CMDG, I transitioned to GDI, where so GDI is basically an impact-driven startup, which focuses on transforming the lives of communities and individuals for an equitable and inclusive environment. So currently we are working with various state governments to execute various projects across sectors. So currently I'm a part of the team in Jaipur. The focus is how do you provide digital access to adolescent girls, and we are targeting around 10 lakh girls to reach in the next 3 years and provide them education through digital mediums. So that has been my journey into the space.
Awesome. Thanks, Naman. Thanks for that. I guess, what Kavya has definitely mentioned, it was quite a down the memory lane kind of thought process and experience that we had right now. So now let's get on to the roles bit of it. So what is it that you're currently doing, right? Just picking on what you have mentioned in terms of what was the mindset that you had before getting into the industry. And I guess my line of business is definitely coming to picture here. But yes, why don't we get into the details about what you do right now? So why don't we begin with, say, Chirag. Chirag, you are working on the grassroots. You are working on ground where you can probably see a sustainable I mean, rather a sizable impact unfold right in front of your eyes, right? You are there working directly with the beneficiaries. You're there directly implementing something that benefits the people, and you interact with them on a day-to-day basis. I am pretty sure it's quite challenging, and then of course the learning potential that you were talking about before getting into the industry, I'm pretty sure that is quite high in your line of business, right? So what is it like? So how does your work look like? Chirag, I guess you're on mute. Yeah.
So I will shed some light on my work and then a little bit on the organization's work, that how it flows into my daily activities. So my major work is with the community organizations, let it be SHG, DO. So SHG, most of us might be aware of. These are the community organizations at the village level, and then VO block level, etc. So normal day looks like training with this women in this area, planning around different aspects like agriculture, around asset creation, Narega, etc. So the idea is to enhance their livelihood through different interventions. Now, in doing that, the major engagement is with the community too and the local stakeholders like panchayat, tehsils, tehsildar, sarpanch, etc. So now, planning and implementing agency at the ground, the job requires a lot of traveling to different villages, panchayats, and everything. So that is a major part of my job. It's dealing with the community and everything. So in last 2 years, like I have taken up different roles. The first year it was more about a development apprentice, where I was placed in Betul district in Madhya Pradesh only. While the second one is of executive, where I'm placed in Scheduled district of Madhya Pradesh. While the first role was about learning the nuances of this development sector, understanding how to work with the community, unlearning a lot of things because our bookish knowledge doesn't really work at the ground level. While the second phase of my job, that is this phase where I'm working as an executive, is more about implementing the projects which are available to now. So as of now, working on different projects. One is of CFT, which is around Narega, which is in direct collaboration with the government of India, while one is around agriculture, which is with a private partner known as Axis Bank Foundation. So there are projects which are with governments, while there are some which are made with collaboration with some private partners. So in a nutshell, if I look at it, it's about identifying whether a project can be run into an area, then approaching organizations like GDI is there, Niti Aayog and Niranta, to have a collaborative approach or for funding purposes. And then our role majorly comes into implementing whatever projects have been finalized. Let it be through training, facilitation, creating resource pool, or like daily financial transactions and monitoring. So the groundwork is what I am like doing as of now. While there are teams located at different levels, as in Delhi or state capitals, where different decisions are taken. So my responsibility is more about working with the community at the ground and implementing the projects which are available to me. At the same time, ideating new things which can enhance their livelihood.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chirag. Thanks for sharing it. Talking about community and Narega to an extent reminds me of the government of India. Ankita, you work with the government of India. So normal understanding of what government offices, pardon me for using the term there, but government offices is this classical red tapeism, full of bureaucracy, work getting done extremely slow. But what we understood is that, of course, things changed a little bit from the role that you are currently doing, the project that you are associated with. So what is it that you exactly do, and how did it change from the conventional understanding of a government organization?
Thanks, Anirudh, for that. So I'll just maybe start with an introduction of what the particular vertical is it that I work in. So Atal Innovation Mission is one of the verticals at Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog has a lot of verticals. They also work a lot in health, education, aspirational districts, livelihood promotion, all of that. Different ministries they work along with. But this specific vertical, Atal Innovation Mission, is different because it is a funding agency. So most of the verticals do not have the power to fund. They can't disburse money. But our particular vertical actually has that power to, be able to disburse money to a lot of institutions. Okay, so that is about the organization. And in terms of if I'll go back to your question in terms of the culture and, what is it all about. So thankfully, this particular, Niti Aayog has sort of brought in this model of young professionals. And even when you come to our office, you'll realize that so Niti Aayog is like 5 floors, and 4 floors are, is designed in the old style of planning commission. And the 5th floor is actually called the think tank. So it's all designed in that corporate setup. You feel like you've entered a startup office, because it's all young people working here and there. It's very dynamic. So thankfully, in that sense, because most of the people here have been laterally hired, it's a very fast-paced culture. It's like a very sweet spot between a startup and a government office. So I like that about this particular place. And then coming back to the specific thing that I work on, it's called the Atal Community Innovation Center. And the idea is that we're creating these community innovation centers in tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural areas, tribal areas, basically areas which do not have an ecosystem for startups, innovation, and all of that. And what we primarily do is that we disburse money to these centers. So everything from, so before we disburse this money, everything from the selection to their funding to their monitoring and evaluation is completely done at our end. So when I say selection, it means that we are the team who's designing the entire application of these particular programs. So who will be the people who will be the organization that will get the fund? What will the selection process look like? All of that is done completely at our end. And once we have finalized, okay, these are the locations at which we can probably establish these centers, these are the organizations that we want to work with, then starts the compliance process, because it's public money, it's our money. You have to do enough due diligence and compliance to ensure it does not go in the wrong hands. So all of that, little operation part comes in, and documentation and ensuring that everything is right in place. All of that goes in there. And then finally, once the money is disbursed, we come to the monitoring part, because you have to monitor them for the next 5 years, because that's how long the project is. So, we have monthly calls with them. We actually keep visiting the place at least twice or thrice the entire year. And we have a dashboard where all of these organizations are supposed to fill in their, status at the end of each and every month, as in how many startups have they supported, how many innovators have they reached out to, what are the kind of events that they have done, what are the number of events that they have done. And specifically, this is the overview of the structure. We also keep doing a lot of capacity building and knowledge building, because it's about creating an ecosystem. So, we do a lot of trainings for the team that runs this ACIC, for these startups, for these innovators. And we also keep getting in a lot of private partners. There's a lot of collaboration that happens at NITI Aayog. A lot of private partners coming, they support us in areas that is not our expertise. And I also want to very quickly mention that we have a very strong inclination of SDGs in this, because we're very closely working with UNDP in this particular project. So there's an angle of SDGs and working on SDG problems through these innovations. So yeah, that's like the overall snapshot of the work that we are doing.
It's quite good to know that finally the government is also looking at such an extent where young people are brought in as think tank aspect of it. Talking about communities and specific issues as such, right? We have Kavya, who is actually working on one such issue, which unfortunately has been a deep-rooted problem in the current societal aspect that we are talking about. I mean, unfortunately, it's still the current societal aspect that we are talking about. So Kavya, how does it look like working working on an issue which is associated with a lot of, I would say, taboos and societal misunderstandings as such, right? So how is it like? So what does your work entail, and how does it feel like?
Right. So overall, Niranta is a resource center. So we produce knowledge. It's an entire thing of knowledge creation, which can be in the form of audio, visual, curriculum, mostly text. So it has also evolved over the years. Right now, we have this online feminist think tank and a portal called The Third Eye. So you'll find the latest form of medium, which is audio visual. It's fantastic. I would recommend everyone to check it out. A collaboration with lots of different organizations, because the pieces have been written together, the research has been done together. Overall, Niranta has this idea of empowering through education. And everything is done from a feminist perspective. So whatever we do, it's done from a lens of gender, sexuality, caste, class, religion, age, region, language, disability, everything. And in our curriculum, it's not like we put it in one chapter. It's all over the place. It's everywhere. It's integrated. So I'll take a quick example. We do a lot of things, but I'll just take a quick example to share what I do. I'm currently working with adolescent girls and very young adolescent girls and boys. And I also work with a few fellows who are doing a 4-month project from different communities. we can talk about that later if anyone's interested. But this learning center, so this is a project which I've been associated with very closely. We were approached by a funder to open a learning center. In fact, they wanted us to just draft a curriculum for very young adolescents. I'll refer to them as VYAs. Um, and and that's because we had a history of working with older adolescent girls, and these are all out of school adolescents who've either never been to school or they've dropped out, and they live in urban slums, or we can call them urban resettlement areas or busties. So our first step was we need to open a center because the curriculum is not written in a vacuum. We need people to work with. We need to understand who we're writing it with. So in this case, a funder approached us. We would also do this if a community organization or an individual approached us. So our next step was to find who do we work with. And this was a parallel process with actually doing our own research. As Ankita mentioned, doing our own due diligence of, making sure that we know what we're doing, because this is really, really important. We need to do this to empower people. So we did our own research on VYEs. We also did a scoping, and we generally work with organizations which are deeply rooted in the community. So often they're from marginalized sections, all the team members, the teachers, most importantly, they're from the community. We want to build capacity of young women from the community. The next thing would be to talk to all the, community members, the parents, guardians, women from the Mahila Panchayat even. So we have a really detailed focus group discussion, and we sort of jot down that what are we doing, who are we doing it for, who are these people, what are their needs. All of our work is super contextual. So we build the entire curriculum for their lens and for their realities. So this happens, we get their needs, we draft a curriculum, we pilot it in the center. Before piloting it, we do an intensive training process, a capacity building process of the teachers. Again, the teachers have been brought from the community, and we've been a part of their recruitment with our partner organization who's implementing it. So we do this, we do their training in, pedagogy. We have our own word pedagogy. People in the education field might be familiar with Hindi, math, thematic areas. We do a detailed training on gender, sexuality, different core social issues. And then they start doing it. We are doing the hand-holding throughout. We're there for them. We do demo sessions in the centers. We do separate sessions with the learners. And then the most fun part. So we get all of their feedback, all of their inputs into the curriculum, which will be the final draft eventually. So we have the learners' drawings, their answers, their responses, their stories. And that's exciting because that is what is making it participative. We're getting all the feedback from the community, everyone, and that goes in there. And then we try to disseminate it further. So this is just like a quick view of one of the things I'm really involved in.
Great. Thanks, Kavya. Thanks a lot for that. Thinking about partnership and impact generation and communities, we have Naman here, who's working with an impact consulting organization, for-profit impact consulting organization, if I'm not wrong. So Naman, so there is again a word outside in the market that say impact consulting, or rather development consulting as an industry, is a torchbearer in changing the way people look at the development sector to a great extent, right? So they follow a corporate kind of a structure, if I'm not wrong, like a partner, then someone working under the partner, a consultant, individuals, etc., in order to ensure that an impact is being generated and towards, the goal in which they work towards, it's definitely the development sector. So what is it to work? How does it feel like working with an impact consulting organization, that to a for-profit organization again?
Yeah. So Pele, let's understand what does an impact consultant really do, right? Or what does impact consultancy is. So if I put it in one line, impact consultants work with their clients, can be governments, NGOs, funders, etc., to design and execute large-scale development projects, right? But why do our clients need impact consultants at the first place, right? Why can't governments do their projects on their own? Why can't funders, design and implement the projects? So there are 3-4 main, problem areas or gaps that currently exist and which impact consultants aim to fill. So if I break down, the need for impact consultants, it can be, first is, especially if it's applicable for government, they don't have time to sit and think through things, right? The government departments are already overburdened with a lot of projects and a lot of schemes and a lot of paperwork, due to XYZ reasons. So they don't get time to sit and think through what if this happens, what will their strategy be, and how does the framework of impact look like. So that's one primary issue. Second is they don't have they know a lot about their own sector, right? Suppose there's an edtech firm, they know about edtech in and out, but they have lesser visibility over other sectors. But an impact consultant works across sectors, so they know what are the best case management practices that are followed across sectors, and can they be included in their space as well. So can a best practice from, let's say, health department be utilized in an education department as well, and vice versa. So this kind of visibility and best is created by impact consultants. Second is when you're working as a government officer or as a funder in a particular space, then you build certain biases, right? For example, if I'm an edtech firm, I might have certain biases regarding my product or my field, my work that I have done in last couple of years or 10 years or whatever. So an impact consultant, because he or she is an outsider, so they can bring in fresh and new perspective into the scenario, and they can help in bringing out those notions of biases, and give an external view of how things can be improved or how things can be made better. So basically, an impact consultant focuses on, there are of course other things as well, but these are 3 or 4 major gaps that we help organizations in fixing. Now coming to how does our work or how does our projects look like? So let's take an example to understand this. So currently I'm working on providing digital education to 10 lakh girls in Rajasthan's government schools, right? But that is very open-ended problem statement, right? How do you want to provide access? Do you want to provide access at home? Do you want to provide access in schools through some sort of infrastructure or through some community model, right? If you want to provide this infrastructure, suppose you provide tablets to every girl child who is enrolled in government schools. But then how will those girl students actually access the content? What will be the software that they'll be using? What will be the content that is actually provided to them? Then how will you actually monitor all of these things? How will you ensure that students are actually using the tablet to consume content and not for other purposes? How will you ensure that tablets are actually with the students and not with, let's say, their parents or any other government partner or whatever, right? So how do you create mechanisms around it? How do you build dashboards? How do you collect data at every stage? So our work primarily is to diagnose what current gaps are in the education space, specifically in digital learning. Then see what are the existing mechanisms that can be leveraged to provide digital education, building a plan around it, which leverages existing infrastructure, which also bridges the gap which currently exists, and creating a roadmap for its implementation end to end. It will include timelines. It will require what are your human resources, who will do what, when will they do it, etc., etc., and then actually helping the government or any other client in actually implementing that on ground through various support mechanisms. So that is how our work in broader terms look like, and it has been an interesting journey for me personally, because I like the scale of impact, the scale at which we work, and the potential impact that we target, right? For example, in this project itself, we are targeting 10 lakh girls across the state in the next 3 years, which is a huge quantum of impact, right? So this keeps me going personally in the sector.
Awesome. Thanks, Naman. Now, just to move on to a little bit, again, to a different tangent altogether, a lot of us will definitely at the back of our mind have this question that what is a specific skill set and what is the perspective that is actually required to work in the development sector? Just to pick up an example, so Kavya has mentioned that they work a lot on pedagogy, a lot on, say, curriculum development, and a lot of other aspects with respect to that, right? So, I mean, when we're talking about such specific industrial aspects, right? So, what is it that we require? I mean, that is acquired, and what is it that we pick up in the industry? I mean, what is an acquired and a learned versus straight kind of a format, right? So, Kavya, why don't you first just throw some light on what are the skill sets and what are the perspectives that are actually required to work in the industry?
So I think that answer would vary a lot on differing profiles or what kind of work you're going for. For me, yes, my background in, I worked with KGBVs before, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas, schools for out of school girls. And I also had a few other volunteering and interning experiences. But there was no specific skill set. They did ask for writing samples and, just wanted to understand what my level of writing was, because it is a writing job. But most of all, for me at least, I think the basic thing you need is a perspective. And as you mentioned, a perspective of, this is work. Firstly, it's not, a lot of people in our society make it out to be like a drop year. Okay, like, what, go enjoy, do this stuff for a year, feel good about yourself and come back. Then let's do some grown-up stuff. That's not how it works. It's genuine hard work, and it's very rewarding. And it's like, as a professional, it's very rewarding, not just as a human. So going in with this perspective and a mindset to learn, you learn so much. And if I had to, describe my experience in one word, it would be fascinating, because of the number of things I've learned and the growth I've felt in me. So I feel like those mindset to learn, to work with people, as Ankita rightly mentioned at the beginning, there's like, guys, don't fall into the savior complex. You're working with people, you're not working for people, and you're just going in and you're going to meet badass people, learn from them. I feel like that's the important thing.
So I am going to thread as to two different aspects right now from what you have told, right? One is not making it a saint-like kind of a role, right? A saint-like kind of an industry. So Naman, you are working with a money-oriented, earning-oriented kind of an organization within the industry. Then of course, Chirag, you are working on the grassroots, where impact probably takes a better opportunity. I mean, a front runner rather than say, of course, like it takes a front runner rather than without comparing to any other thing. So let's begin with Naman. So how is it? I mean, what is the skill set or what is the perspective that probably an impact consultant would have while working in the development consultancy?
Thanks, Anurag. Actually, that's a very interesting point. And unlike some specific job profiles, in corporate sector, let's say financial advisor, etc., where you need very hard skills, I would say development sector, or at least impact consultancy, doesn't require any hard skills as of now. They are good to know skills. For example, if you are very proficient in Google, in Excel, PowerPoint, Stata, they are all good to have, right? But you will build on these things as you grow into the organization. But when you come into the sector, there are essentially three kinds of you can say attitude, skill set, or whatever that a candidate should have, and these are IQ, AQ, and EQ. What I mean by IQ is your intelligent quotient, right? How are you able to pick up things? Are you able to understand things easier? Are you able to pick up things faster? So that's the IQ bit of it. When we come to AQ is, I have picked AQ from one of the sessions that we had at the organization. So AQ is adaptability question, because development sector, particularly governance sector, is very dynamic, right? Let's take example of governance sector. You're working with a bureaucrat and he or she gets transferred the next day. You're working with a new person now and they might not be on board with your idea. So how do you adapt to that situation quickly? How do you work around things? How do you, COVID is the biggest example in this space. A lot of organizations, development sector organizations as well, have been impacted with COVID. But how quickly how agile they have been, to adapt to the growing scenario. So that's the second factor, AQ. Third is the emotional question, right? Because when you're working in a development space, specifically at a macro level, at a strategy level, then you sometimes lose sight of the ground. Then you sometimes lose sight of how your beneficiaries, what's the profile of your beneficiaries or targeted audience, and what are their requirements. So having that emotional question where you can relate to that particular girl student, or you can particularly relate to that farmer for whom you are working, and you are able to see from their eyes on what are their specific needs and what they really need, and then accordingly include that in your design and include it in your project aspects. So I would say these are the three things that are mainly required: IQ, EQ, and AQ in terms of soft skills.
Yeah, I think good presentation skills is also a must, which is clearly seen here. Chirag, so I understand that there would be a lot of overlap. What Kavya has mentioned, what Naman has mentioned. Of course, a lot of things would definitely merge together and there'll be a lot of overlap. So is there any specific skill set or say a perspective that is necessary to work on the ground with, say, the beneficiaries directly? How does that look like? I mean, anything at all?
Like most of the things have been covered by these two. So there is just one thing which I want to mention, that is about the internal motivation which one needs to have while working at grassroots. As the team sizes are very small and like you don't have that peer support which you expect. So most of the times you work in isolation. So you need to have the internal motivation to toil hard, to work for like long stretches of not hours, but like long stretches of motivation, because the motivation keeps fluctuating. So that is something which I think is most essential while you are working at the grassroots. And then there is this process of unlearning, because as I said earlier, at grassroots, the bookish knowledge doesn't actually apply. It changes according to the situation. So these are the two things which I want to add with what Naman and Kavya said.
Absolutely, quite real and quite a philosophical stance as well. Definitely, absolutely true. That I think you have definitely pointed out a very good point out there. So till now we had been talking about the past. I mean, how your journeys towards the development consultancy has worked, or sorry, development sector has worked to a great extent, and what is it that you're currently doing, right? Let's take a step forward and then talk about the future. Of course, all of us worry about the future. What next? Again, the millennial mindset about what next is definitely lingering around all of our minds, right? So why don't we, again, a couple of other questions also in the chat as well on the Google link that we have shared before, have put up about the opportunities going forward in the industry, right? Once, of course, you have joined the industry, what next? Is a question that a lot of people do definitely ask about. So why don't we start about that? Ankita, why don't you talk about, I mean, what is the opportunities and what is the potential that working in this sector and specifically tending towards your particular role? So how does it look like? If you can just throw some light on it.
Right. So I think the government space specifically, so I will start initially maybe, just defining what are the kind of opportunities that I have understood while my time here that exist in the government space, because essentially what has happened is that this space was very closed, right? It was only limited to a certain crowd, and people don't really understand what goes and, what are the kind of opportunities in this particular space. How do you actually end up working with the government? So I think in the last 4 5 years that has changed a lot. And so three main things here. Number one, a lot of ministries have now started like taking up this young professional model, and they started using that in their organization as well. So a Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Textiles, and other ministries as well. These are the just few ones that I have seen, from my own eyes, and I know people who work there as young professionals. Then the second aspect of this is that even so, apart from the ministries, the government has a lot of teams and different organizations at different levels as well. So they have also started hiring a lot of lateral talent, a lot of young talent, and places like Startup India, Invest India, the office of principal scientific advisor, the PSA office, and then you have organizations like QCI, Quality Council of India. These are like, if you actually go in there, you realize most of them are lateral hires. Most of the people who have, who are actually being laterally hired, and they work on a lot of aspects in these particular organizations. Then the third thing is that a lot of state governments have started doing this as well, starting having a lot of fellowships, having a lot of other things where young people can come in and lateral hire can come in. So, Delhi government does that very, very proactively. Of course, we know about the Haryana government and CMGJA, which Naman is a part of. And then there is the Punjab government has also started doing that, the Maharashtra government. So a lot of governments, you just really have to keep your eyes open. So this is just like a brief of the kind of opportunities in the government space that are there. And the process differs from each and every organization. So, I mean, the selection process is very different, but it's pretty much, let's say an application, an interview process, and then you sort of get selected. Most of the times, this is how it looks like. There might be a G&D coming in, group discussion coming in maybe. Now talking about, the growth that we see in this sector, and, how do you really, what is it that is in the future? So essentially, all of these verticals that Naman initially mentioned, right? Research, consulting, implementation, grassroots organizations, governance, all of these speak to each other. And what I mean by that is that, so if you're working in a grassroots organization, you can at any day switch to consulting or let's say research. So, they keep, it's very, actually very fluid, they keep talking to each other, keep moving around. In fact, to give an example, I have a colleague at Niti Aayog who first started off by working on the SBI Youth for India Fellowship, which is a grassroots organization. Then he moved on to CMGJA, which is a governance kind of an organization. decided it was super random. It came on the YIF group, actually, our batch group. And I was initially not even applying. I was like, I don't know what this is. And then I applied, but because, I was like, there was nothing else happening. I was like, okay, this looks interesting. Let's apply. And this is where I am. So, it's really, you have to keep scouting for options. You have to keep talking to people to be able to, get something here. Yeah.
Thanks, Ankita. Thanks for that. Again, throw at the harsh realities of the world as such. But yes, thanks for that. Now, talking about specifically about the fellowships, we do definitely have, again, Ankita also has mentioned, we do have two people on the panel right now who have done specific fellowships in the past, right? So one, Chirag, about Mother Teresa Fellowship. You were a part of MTF. You worked across projects while you were at MTF. Then you got into the grassroots bit of it, right? So quick understanding of what does MTF all about, and how did the fellowship help you as to what you're currently doing? Very quickly, if you can just do that.
So I would give a brief idea about MTF, that is Mother Teresa Fellowship. It's an opportunity for the students of Ashoka, like who wants to have a career in the social sector or let's say development sector. So it has two components. One is the financial component where a fellow is paid up to rupees 20,000 to cover the differences of the salary which you are like getting for organizations up to 40,000. That is one component of it. While the second component is non-financial component, which works around the values, ethos, principles of working in the social sector as well as an individual and a development practitioner in a long run. So this is a overview of Mother Teresa Fellowship. While it's a 1.5 years long fellowship, which I recently finished in last December. So it has a couple of orientations and then two workshops during 1.5 periods and concluding with the final workshop at the end. Till my time, it was only open for the Ashoka graduates, but there are talks about opening it for non-Ashoka professionals. So I'm not sure, from this year onwards, it might be opening for everyone who is interested in social sector. So that can be something which we can be looking upon.
Absolutely, absolutely. I guess if anyone has further questions about MTF, they'll definitely reach out to you, if I'm not wrong. Yes, Naman, so about CMGG, one more such fellowship which directly works with the district collectors and with the government of Haryana to a greater extent, right? So what is that all about? And I mean, any quick glance on that as well?
Yeah. So as you rightly mentioned, right, Chief Minister's Good Governance Associate is a collaboration between Government of Haryana and Ashoka University. Where the idea is how do you bring in new energy and new young crowd into the governance space. So the associates are placed with district collectors and they support them on various state flagship programs, and they are across sectors, right? At the same time, we will be working on education, health, government to citizens delivery, etc., etc. So what if I talk about my learnings from the program, the biggest learning has been, breaking the mindset of how government works and what government is, and do they even have an intent to work, right? So from outside the government setup, we generally think ke sarkar karti kya hai, right? We have that red tapeism wala angle. We know that babus are sitting in the offices chewing pans and stuff, right? But this fellowship actually, showed me what are the crucial gaps due to which the policies which are formed at the state level or at the national level, they don't really transform it to impact on ground, right? And how through very simple, very non-tech based innovations, you can actually create impact which impacts lakhs and lakhs of people, right? And it can be, as simple as that. Okay, you start monitoring the performance of districts, so you start comparing one district to the other, giving them a scorecard of sorts, so that there is a positive competition among the districts to perform in a certain way. Or it can be just how you place certain things, how you place certain folders or files in your record rooms, so that retrieving that files becomes easier for you. So these are some simple tricks which helps, and which are and these insights have been helping me throughout my journey at GDI as well, where I know how district collector is going to think, how district officer is going to think, and now I can build systems around it to to not try to change their thinking, but to adjust my program in a way that it enables them to work towards the same goals. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Naman, for that. Now, let me get to a point where, which is probably something that has been concerning all of us to one extent or the other, right? The current COVID scenario that's been going on. It has definitely impacted all of us on a personal, on a professional front, both of the fronts as well, especially on the mental and the psychological front for sure. So when we talk about that, well, of course, I also remember a conversation I had with Naman a couple of days back where he was talking about how when he was associated with CMGGA, they worked with COVID, I mean, during the COVID issue, etc. So and now I just want to specifically point it towards, I mean, certain aspects of COVID and the impact that it has created in the industry per se, right? So Kavya, you do work with a section of individuals, section of citizens of the country, which unfortunately were the worst hit because of the COVID impact, right? On a personal front, we always, I mean, there is not a single day which passed by where we didn't read an unfortunate incident that happened at a domestical level for unspeakable, I mean, I don't have words literally to explain that, right? So you do work with such a section of the society. So how was the scenario that has changed from, say, a pre-COVID and a post-COVID era? I mean, any day-to-day changes or anything in those lines?
You got it right. Things went haywire, and I mean, that people said things, and I know of things which even I wouldn't want to repeat here, to some level. But let's just say that it was terrible. So what happened in COVID? Now, for someone in a learning center, of course, they could not come to the learning center, which was their only space of a little bit of freedom. They were in tiny rooms, which were like houses which were the size of our rooms, and that gives you a perspective of being shut in those spaces. Their parents aren't able to go to work, they themselves aren't able to go to work. My 12-year-old learners work, they need to work. So they aren't able to work, they're not able to access education, they're dropouts already, so that means they weren't used to coming to a center in the first place and sit and focus on something. So we worked on that. We were trying to work on them with that, but then COVID came, they forgot everything. We had to do the revision again, and then the second wave. So yes, lots of terrible things, and beyond terrible, I mean, that's an understatement. We went into relief work mode. We worked for that. But then turning things around a little bit. So we had to work for it. We had to address these issues. So we started doing a lot of things online. Most of our learners do not have access to digital resources, but whoever did, we tried to work with them. We tried to, join in any conversations, just that, hi, hey, how was your day? Are you doing okay? Do you have food? Do you want us to give you the ration kits? This is what the teachers were doing every day. Apart from this, we started a project called the YIF project, where we took our training online. Now, if I were to ask a woman from a marginalized community or a trans person or a non-binary person who don't have enough resources to come to Delhi, come for this training, it's a lot to ask for. Permission is not easy. Nothing is easy. So what we did was we took this online, we did a training, and we'll be working with them online and giving them a fellowship and amount for their work. So this is how we're trying to do it. We're also trying to digitize our curriculum for learners and do a hybrid model of sorts so that we can reach people who are not easily reachable.
Great. Thank you, Kavya. Thanks for sharing that. I can definitely understand how hard it would have been working with the beneficiaries directly. Chirag, I also have one question for you related to the COVID issue that's going on, right? You did mention in the initial brief up that you have given that your role involves a lot of traveling, which definitely took a great toll because of the issue, right? So, I mean, how did it impact your day-to-day work? I mean, of course, you are working in the rural part of India, and of course, your work also involves a lot of traveling and going to places, meeting a lot of people. All of them were a big no given the current issue, right? So, how did it impact your role that you did before COVID and after the COVID issue has come up?
So if I talk about the day-to-day engagements of my work, the basic idea is working about with the communities. That got derailed like totally. We were not able to have group meetings community level. So obviously we tried different things like Zoom meetings, meetings over WhatsApp, and like whatever was possible. But looking at the digital penetration, as Kavya also mentioned, like 5 to 10% success ratio, I consider it as a great achievement in that time. So that was a major hurdle during that thing. So also we get into relief work apart from our regular works while helping the vulnerable families out here, which are affected by lockdown mostly, not by COVID. So lockdown was a major hurdle initially. Now going forward, like also like with that, we started supporting the local hospitals doing COVID treatments with providing them with stuff and materials which they require. But looking forward, I am hoping that organizations like Pradhan, which are like big organizations, get into this health sector to so as to mitigate the resources. One of my major frustrations during this period was this the expectations from the donor side. I'm not sure like how they think or like what was their expectations, but the deadlines didn't change during this lockdown and this period. So like that's surprising, but that's the reality. They were expecting that we should carry out all the works during the lockdown in such a scenario, but that's the reality which we live in.
Understandable. Thanks, Chirag. Thanks for that. Now, just to talk about from a balcony view of it, right? So we do have people who worked with the government in the past, like Naman, who's currently working with government, like Ankita, right? So how did this issue impact in any of the activities? That very quickly, if you can just walk us through what is the kind of impact, any either of you, if you could just walk us through about that, that will be also helpful, I guess, for because most of the questions that we also received were revolving around the same issue, right? So I mean, of course, how is the future? Is it secure given the COVID issue? Because and none of our futures are, I mean, they're very uncertain going forward, right? So I mean, yeah. And the reason why I gave a little smirk there is because my industry is one such greater industry which works on very uncertain times right now. So any insights from the government perspective or working with the government, how did it impact, how did the entire issue impact, or how did the organization scope up, being one of the major stakeholders in the entire issue, right? How did it work out? Anyone, either of you can just pick it up.
Yeah. So if I talk about my experience of during COVID time, so I was working in the district only. So when COVID struck and when the first lockdown happened, so everyone was in, the people weren't sure what to do, right? Because even medical professionals didn't know what's going on in the world and what's going to happen in India. And same was with the governments as well, because there was no information available as to what kind of precautions should take, what will stop COVID pandemic at a given time. Should you have a lockdown? What kind? How strict the measures should be? Should you allow the markets to open? If yes, then how do you prevent overcrowding, etc., etc. So all of these were the things that governments were also struggling with, and they were also, to be frank, they were also reaching the answer by hit and trial method because there was no proven technique which they could go back to. But I think one thing that works in government is, which we call, bureaucracy or red tapeism, is actually the record keeping, right? So, I have seen people who went back to, 1917 and, other pandemic times, and they had those records available with them, although they were in different languages, that's and different texts, sort of, different scenario altogether. But those references were very important to see how, how you leverage certain acts, also how you leverage certain facilities which are available with the government or powers available with the government to to help the community as best as they can. So that was a pretty I would say interesting as well, and also scary scenario where you don't know what's going to happen, but at the same time you are also trying your best to do whatever you can. So
Absolutely. I guess you made a very important point saying do the best with whatever is available right now. Is that applies to all of us in our general lives as well right now, given the current situation. Before we move on to understanding, and again, I mean, I would like to talk about what did I understand from the entire discussion that we had. But before that, of course, I mean, there is a question which might be a little sensitive, which is very subjective as a matter of fact. And I mean, it depends on a personal, it depends on personal individual preferences at the end of the day. And obviously, it's quite a sensitive topic to talk about. But of course, we had a lot of questions, which is also the general understanding in the market outside, right? About the pay gap. I mean, a very important point. I don't think there is any escape in that, right? Again, having said that, before to all the people who again asked this question, I would like to make a remark before giving it over to the panelists to talk about it, right? The only thing is, again, it all, as I've told you, it's very subjective. What according to me would be a higher pay might be not according to someone else, right? So the aspect of good pay or a higher pay is a very subjective matter. What it all depends on your personal choices at the end of the day. So now, again, having said that, does anyone want to pick it up? So we have four of them. All of it, it's quite a relevant question to talk about from the industry standpoint of it, right? Anything that you would like to say with respect to this particular issue, with respect to this particular question, which does come up on a regular basis? I'm pretty sure all of us did face that in the past as well, and I guess it's continuing to go on right now. Anyone can just pick it up. It's fine. I don't want to choose anyone in this case.
I think I'll try and address it a little, and then maybe everybody else can add on. So it's, to be honest, it's not a sensitive, issue. It's very bang on. It's right there. This is something that first comes into your sort of mind when you talk about development sector and all of that. And I think it's very important to understand that the pay thing is highly dependent on who is funding your organization, the organization that you work with, where are the funds coming from, and who is funding it, and that creates a lot of sort of difference. And you see these rates of pay scales happening in the development sector itself. We throughout our conversation right now, what I hope what was visible is that this is a very diverse sector. There are a lot of things that people can work on. There's a lot of different organizations, a lot of different levels that they can work on. And so starting from, let's say, a grassroots organization to a consulting or a multilateral organization, the pay scale differs a lot. And as I had mentioned earlier, you can always keep switching on and around. And it's not like it's going to be this kind of a very sort of sad state of pay scale all throughout. It's all about the choices that you make. It's all about what is the work that you want to work on. And I personally feel that at least in the initial years, the initial 2-3 years while you're in this sector, it's great to actually work on the grassroots and get that experience. Pay will come on. I mean, it will come eventually. If that is the concern, you will find a way to be able to get enough pay, because there are so many opportunities. So I feel like initial years, just like worry about the experience and the things that you do. And eventually, if pay is a concern, then you have multiple options. A lot of organizations have different levels, and as your experience keeps increasing, you will keep going higher and higher on the pay scale. In fact, a lot of organizations match the pay scale of corporate as well, eventually later.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ankita. Yes, anyone else to add on any points further to that?
I just want to quickly add that the concerns are real, the pay thing is real, but also it would depend on, what do you consider good money? Of course, we do have certain expectations, but I feel like these are also very structural issues, and that's another to our conversation. It's a very structural issue of where our priorities are as a society, what are we deciding to fund, who are we deciding to fund, and again, we're taking this sector as there are lots of issues with that, but also just it depends on where you are, how much you're spending, but would also encourage you to sort of move for over those concerns. Of course there are needs, and very valid, we all have needs and we all have different levels of needs, but also to just maybe look at the other side as well. Just I guess the four of us and the entire team would like to encourage you to do that. See the other aspects.
Yeah. Adding to what Kavya and Ankita said, my sense is that if we talk about fellowships, right? If I talk about CMGJ fellowship, then they pay a decent amount of money especially for entry-level jobs, right? So you can check on their website. It's 50K per month, and apart from accommodation and everything is etc. sorted for. So that's a good amount of pay for entry-level job in a development sector. But if I talk about consultancy, then I would say that development consultancy matches around 70 to 80% of what corporate sector pays. Obviously, there are some pay gaps because of issues mentioned by Kavya and Ankita, but it's not that big a gap in at least consultancy, which people think it is. And in the field, I have sensed this thing: the supply of jobs is not really an issue, right? Because when we were talking earlier about how do you get into these jobs, etc., etc., so supply of jobs is not really an issue. It's the what do you call it, supply of candidates, let's call it, or how many candidates apply who are like-minded and who fit into that organization's vision. And as you mentioned, skill set, so we don't need any hard skill set, but it's generally the pool of people is very, very small who gets to apply. That being said, I'd also like to point out that GTI is currently hiring. So if anybody is interested, you can log on to our website. And yeah.
I did mention partner with me, but okay, sure. You don't want to do that, but everything else.
We'll take it offline.
Chirag, I guess one of the questions which came up in the form is specific towards on the grassroots and the implementation bit of it, right? Just a quick understanding. So you do work with a section of the society which unfortunately, again, in the liberal upper caste kind of a mentality is still yet to develop, or a vulnerable kind of a section, right? So how do you deal with societal issues like, say, a caste, or the difference in literacy rates, or the entire divide of say a rural urban kind of a setup? So is there like a mechanism, or have you given it a thought in those lines?
So I would go back to what Kavya said earlier, okay, we are working with the communities rather than for the communities. So if these are the structural issues, then community has to take the steps forward to deal with those things. So the idea is more or less around empowering the communities, which takes a couple of years. So all these issues are real and we are conscious of it and are working towards it. But if I look at the direct intervention, it's not there, but it's more about making the community understand and making them empowered enough to do those things. So the interventions is done in that way. As the same thing, we are not working for the community as per se. It's with the community. If they decide that this issue is important, then they would take forward. So whatever things are required in taking that forward, we would help with that. We would provide support around it, but we won't be directly interfering into those kinds of issues. So that's that.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Chirag. So the other question is specifically for the women on the panel, right? So someone has definitely pointed out a very important question through the sheets that we have shared before, right? So someone wanted to understand, what is the difficulties that, say, women in the sector face when they are in the grassroots, or what specific, is there anything that you specifically you think is something that potentially is like a difficulty, is like a special challenge which might come up from a disparity in terms of the gender or whatnot, right? So I mean, is there anything, if can you, I mean, would you like to throw some light on that, or do you have any insights for the same, anything at all?
I would like to start by saying I am very lucky to be working in a feminist organization, and I have incredible women around me, and our office culture is very, very feminist. In a way, we're all very comfortable. I mean, we talk about anything and everything that's related to sexuality, gender, and there's like, you're so frank. I mean, even I'm surprised. Oh, okay, like we're talking about that right now. So at least that level of comfort is there. If you talk about going into the community again, because we also partner with organizations who make you feel comfortable, that's a plus point. There are certain safety issues. I mean, I have felt scared at certain points because, but think about this, you're going into areas and communities which do not have street lamps, which do not have the perfect lighting. What are you going to expect? And the society has built this image, while the safety issue is very real, but they've also put this image in your head that, oh, certain people are very dangerous. So trying to be alert, but also combating that. But also just adding, I know of certain colleagues who've been trying to, they've been traveling to different small cities in Uttar Pradesh and other states, lots of states, and I'm sure this happens in a lot of times. They have faced certain issues regarding authorities and just random people. So there are safety issues, yes. But also I think there is more and more movement to address those, and the space is much, from what I've heard, the space is much better than what it was before. So there's hope.
Thank you, Kavya. Thanks a lot for that. Ankita, Shad, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'll just quickly, thankfully, even in my organization, I mean, it has been a very, very inclusive space, very warm, very welcoming to all ideas from everybody. So thankfully, as such, in work, I haven't faced any specific challenges or so. And in fact, there are so many wonderful women around that, you can learn and get inspired from. So it's only helpful. There's, so that aspect as well. The only few challenges the two challenges that happen when we do a lot of collaboration with other government departments as well, and they are sort of those traditional departments, and sort of when you go in there and talk to these really seasoned ministers or bureaucrats, you realize they don't really take you very seriously, and considering the fact that all of us are young people and all of that, so they're just like, okay, let's just get away with it. But eventually that, that aspect will take time, that mindset shift will take time. But thankfully, with the inclusion of a lot of young people and women specifically, in fact, in NEET, you will see, 60% of our team is actually women. And in fact, the specific team that I work in is actually all women. So that's really nice about, this particular space actually.
Amazing, amazing. Yes, Chirag, I'm so sorry.
So,
Yes.
like, just to add it to it, like giving an example of grassroots. So, the last batch which joined as a development apprentice, there was a ratio of around 50 to 50 to 50. So that is not considered, like, that is not thought of that women actually do work at grassroots. But the real life implication is the numbers are reasonably equal. At the same time, in my team, there are 7 working professionals, while 3 are me. So the ratio at grassroots is also coming towards, and so there has been work around in the direction, and it's the safety issues are real, but still there are women who are coming forward to take this challenge in grassroots too. So just wanted to say that.
Absolutely. Definitely, there's a good future that all of us are hoping towards going ahead, right? We do have a couple of other questions too, but before that, does anyone want to pose a question directly to the panelists? We are more than open for that. Anyone at all? You can just, I guess the host can just let you in. Anyone, you can just raise your hand and then we could probably let you in. Of course, we could see that there are a couple of questions already posted on the chat. Before picking that up, if there's anyone who wants to put up a question directly, please do so.
I think there are two hands, Hiteshri and Yash.
1 second, 1 second. Yes. Hitishri, hello.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I have a question. Thank you so much. This was really informative, first of all, and you've all been really generous with your sharings. So I'd like to ask you, how do you see social, uh, the social development come together with design? I'd just like to know your views on that. I know it's a broad question, but if any of you would like to pick that up.
Can I take that up?
Yes, please.
So specifically, because we actually have a lot of design aspects coming in while we do our design a specific project. In fact, the specific team that I am with, which is the Atal Community Innovation Center. So there was this intern that worked with us. She was from NID, and she worked with us for 6 or 8 months, and she got in the entire aspect of design thinking while developing this entire project. So in fact, even when I am working and designing all of, so there are a lot of things that we keep designing for our beneficiaries. And you need a lot of an angle of, social impact and how will these beneficiaries look like? What are the kind of aspects that this particular thing will cover? In fact, I keep looking out for interns who have that background, or, people who have that background design, and they can help us putting all of that together. So I think specifically when we talk about program designing and strategy, I think having a background in design is highly, highly beneficial from my experience, at least.
Yeah, I can add to that actually. So this is currently we are working with an edtech firm. So we are also exploring the idea of nudges, right? How do we make people click on certain tasks? How do we make it more engaging for the students? So in the whole product of our edtech partner, we are seeing how that particular thing is designed in the terms of graphics as well as in terms of structure. What follows what, right? Should a child do an assessment first, or should a child consume the content first? If a child is doing the assessment, how he or she is looking at things. Are there any stars sort of mechanism which rewards them when they complete a certain tasks, or whatever, what kind of infographics are we putting across? So that's with respect to the ultimate beneficiary, right? But in terms of how we are communicating things to ground as well. So actually in consultancy, generally there is in-house graphic designer as well. So we have a creatives team as well, which helps us in designing the brochures, designing the infographics which go on ground, because the retention of an infographic is far higher than retention of any wordy or texty document. So I think social impact, and then sorry, but then there is the work of documentation as well, right? Because a lot of work happens on ground, but there is no documentation of that work to reach out to masses and to generate awareness. So graphic designers and video editors, directors play a huge role in that aspect. In Rajasthan, there is actually a concept of cinema on wheels, right? Where there's a huge truck which goes to village and actually showcase movies to the students who can't really access it on daily basis, or at a regular basis, or because they are very far away from from the main city areas. Yeah.
Great, great. We have Yash too, who has another question. Yash?
Am I audible properly?
Yeah, Yash, please go on.
Yeah. Thanks for such an informative session, everyone. I have a little question here. Like, is it fine or is it fine to join the social development sector right after YF, or should we pursue some PhD? Not PhD, but should we pursue some master's program and then join the sector? What do you all think on this?
I don't have to pick anyone, I guess. He only picked all of you, so yes.
So Yash, all of us here joined the sector right after YF, I believe. Yes. So yes, it's absolutely fine. I was worried about it too, but then you know what? The level of learning you get on the field, it's probably unmatchable. So I would say go for it. You can go back to studying later. I mean, I would have told you more, but I don't think I have any plans at the moment. I'm a very confused person, but I think it's absolutely fine, and I would encourage you to do it because you will actually see a lot what you learned at YF translate into your work, and the added benefit of that bubble finally bursting. So the bubble bursts and you're able to implement what you learned. So it's a very like lovely thing. Go for it.
And actually, I would suggest against, going for masters directly after YF, especially if you want to work in development sector, because I'll give you my example, right? During YF, I used to think, okay, I want to do MPP and, go to any public policy school and get my masters. But now working in the sector, I'm realizing that I'll be more useful in the sector if I do an MBA, because the main issues in the sector or with the government is actually management, right? Policies banana governments ko aata hai, and they create beautiful policies around it, and they create beautiful kya kehte hain, clauses in those policies to to make them safe and to cover all the aspects, but they don't really know how to manage these things on ground, and there I think I can personally add value. So and when you do a master's, you generally specialize in a particular scenario, right? But what if you go to a master's, complete your master's, come back to the sector and don't really like the sector, right? Because as I think Kavya and Ankita also mentioned, and Chirag also mentioned, bookish knowledge se काफी different है sector on ground, right? So how do you what is your backup plan there? So that's my personal thought process.
I guess we have one more question. Harshita?
Yes, hi. I absolutely loved the seminar and the great and valuable intel you've all said. Uh, I just wanted to ask that I've personally done my MSc in behavioral economics, and I was wondering how much influence like behavioral sciences and behavioral economics in general has in the social development sector, and like are nudges, are they a focal point of policy making and implementation, or is there any space for it to become a focal point in the future?
Again,
Naman, do you want to pick it up? Yeah.
yeah. So Harshita, I am excited about your degree and your background, because I recently worked on nudges a lot during this project, and I think nudges are an underrated part of how government thinks currently, and they have a huge scope, huge scope in changing how government interacts with the citizens. I'll give you few basic examples, right? Let's talk about Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. It has been a successful campaign in terms of marketing, but you go to any city, you go to the cleanest city in India as well, but you see the backend system, all the waste is unsegregated, nothing really gets recycled, etc., etc. But using nudges, you can actually change behavior of citizens, right? Basic example can be telling them, how do I put it? Basically, so one example can be, this is a real problem that we have also faced. The garbage vehicle will go at around 7-8 to these people's home when they're actually getting prepared for their offices and leaving for office, especially in a city like Delhi, right? But if you understand the psychology of the citizens and you say, okay, I'll move this garbage taking time to later in the night, let's say at around 8 or 9, when people are actually at the home, so people might give out more trash to the garbage vehicles rather than throwing it on the sides of the road. So these are just few examples, and I think they have a huge implication in all the sectors, because there is always citizen interaction, especially in the government space.
I wanted to very quickly add to this. I don't know about it personally, but I have some of my very good friends worked on this subject, even during the fellowship. And I see the scope when I'm working in the community. I mean, we have gender norms, right? And how do we break gender norms? By encouraging young boys to take, to do work at home, and their parents to accept it, because even if a boy is working at home, their parents are like, what are you doing? Make your sister do it. And I feel like things like this and so many other things. So I see the scope, but I am not seeing a lot of implementation. So I'm actually excited to see that happening more.
I just want to add to what Naman and Kavya said. So in fact, even in Niti Aayog, we actually thankfully our CEO is like very dynamic in terms of incorporating all of these trends and putting them out there. So we had this like full blown seminar to ensure that all of these young people understand what nudge is, and how do we actually incorporate these nudges in our policies, because to make any policy sustainable, you have to build a change in the behavior. It's not going to be sustainable if you don't really change the behavior of people. It can't just be forced onto them. It has to slowly change their behavior. So yes, I mean, Naman is absolutely right. The government is sort of trying to inculcate this behavioral economics in all of these policies, and I see like huge scope there.
I think without overshooting our time, I guess we have one more question that we can pick up. Praveen. Praveen has raised his hand. Praveen?
Hello.
Yeah,
Hi.
Praveen.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So I worked in the space sector, India's private space sector, especially at Agnikul, and I was developing the brains of the rocket. And I was happy to see Niti Aayog and especially the AIM start helping space industries last year during the pandemic. So I was wondering. By the way, after resigning from there, I was in a startup accelerator called Entrepreneur First, and I tried studying a company, but couldn't get any proper hardware resources due to India's, lack of hardware expertise and supply chain. So, like, how's the, is there any role there in the government where, I mean, that's what that's when I thought of, like, probably we should kind of uh, bring, try bringing some kind of resources to India to help the hardware startups India. So, like, is there any kind of space for that in here?
Yeah, I'll take that up, Praveen. So, so specifically when we talk about, hardware innovation and startups working in that space, so essentially so at least in Atal Innovation Mission, the support directly goes to the incubators. And then we have we have a total of around, I think, 68 Atal incubation centers in the entire country. And a few of these incubation centers are very specific. They're very focused on working on certain sectors. So the sector that you are talking about, I mean, I don't have an answer ready as in which incubator, could possibly be supporting such startups. But I can definitely, we can probably connect offline, and I can definitely figure out what are these particular incubators that support startups in this particular domain that you are talking about. And so in fact, even during COVID, a lot of work was being done because most of these oxygen concentrators that you have, the parts of these oxygen concentrators have to be imported. So a lot of work was being done to ensure that these parts can actually be manufactured within India. And obviously AIM was trying to support these startups, and these incubators were trying to support these startups who could possibly build all of these parts. So it can happen for different domains as well. So yeah, we'll probably connect off. I'll try and figure out which particular incubator can do that for you.
Absolutely. Just to probably this is the part where I'd like to just like put in my insights as well, because why not? And then just to talk about towards the end of the call, if there's any other questions, you can just feel free to put it across. And I'm pretty sure all of them are available. I wouldn't say all of us in this case, but all of them are available to talk about specific questions further on and how to pick it up from there. I'm pretty sure the objective of why we started this conversation is almost met in this case, where we wanted just to have a brief understanding of the sector to a great extent, right? I mean, of course, not in-depth analysis or not in-depth understanding of the sector overall. That is the reason our choice of the panelists have been all the young professionals who are right now just entered into the industry and who are still probably having the same frame of mind like everyone else that probably we had in the audience sector, right? Struggling through everyday life, as we like to call it, across industries as well. If I'm not wrong, of course, we did talk about the different sections, different disciplines, and different subsections of the sector to a great extent. But having said that, of course, collaboration is the key, right? Collaboration across the sectors, collaboration across different organizations, different verticals is something that I can definitely pinch about, right? If, of course, if we had time and if we can talk about a specific case study which can thread all of us together, well, let's definitely do that. But again, let's not get into the details of such or talk about hypothetical things in a greater extent out there. But well, having said that, of course, you have given us a good view of the sector in terms of understanding what is it and how does it feel, like what are the journeys and what are the stories, also ensuring that the objective of YF Talks is met to a great extent. Of course, YF Talks was a platform that Farhan himself has initiated in terms of sharing the stories and personal experiences, which is what is also met in this case. It was amazing to go through all of your personal life experiences, what you do on a day-to-day basis, all of the challenges you face, the barriers you had to overcome, and you are still overcoming as we speak right now. And I would say much respect. I wouldn't say any kind of a saint-like of a perspective that I have towards any one of you, because all of us are at the same level trying to do something meaningful in the line of business that we are, not questioning or not giving out a conclusion on one particular, not passing on a verdict rather, on one particular industry, or not trying to put up any such things. I would say massive respect, given the fact that the number of challenges that probably you would have faced is in no doubt quite a huge number in lines of probably when compared to some other industry that we can think about, right? Of course, to all of the audience, thanks a lot for participating in this particular conversation. I don't think this discussion would have happened without all of you. We did have a lot of homework that is done in the past, where we kind of remembered our YF days 2 years after our graduation, where we sat up till around 12:30 last night just to discussing how to go about with it, the entire flow, critiquing. All of us are wearing black hats. Kavya brought the topic up again of the black hat, taking YF back again, right? So thanks a lot for all of you for taking your time out this evening and having this conversation with us. If there's anything else that you'd like to know about, all of them are available. All of us are available. I'm going to sneak in us here. All of us are available just to talk about. We definitely understand, especially for all the recent grads right now, 2020 batch, and probably all the incoming batch people who are yet to join the YF. Definitely, one message is you have an entire year full of a roller coaster ride for you ahead, and you're going to enjoy it for sure. For all the 21 batch people, of course, times are tough right now. We totally understand. We are there with you, the entire alum body to an extent. I can proudly say this, that the entire alum body is there with you. Networking as a matter of fact is something that we definitely bank upon, right? So all of us are there, and thanks a lot for taking your time out. And all the panelists, do you have anything at last to talk about? Any final thoughts, any closing remarks? Namang, you already gave a branding of GDI. We're not talking about that any further. You are recruiting, we know that. Anything else anyone wants to share about it? Absolutely open for it.
Just thank you to the entire YF Talks team, like just and really involving us in this process. We really started with a 1 hour discussion, ended up with 3 hours, and still having to continue the next day because we love talking and discussing that what's going on in the sector. So thank you for bearing with us, and thank you for having us here. And to whoever wants to join and maybe listening, like, you will figure it out. That's like, you will figure it out. It might take a few months. It might be a trial and error, but you will figure it out. Don't worry. It's a good space. It motivates you. The people, the work, everything you do, it's very fulfilling. So I hope you come join us.
Let me also chime in with Kavya and, thanking the YF Talks team for conducting this. No, like, very honestly, I mean, this is something that all of them do out of work, apart from the usual work that they do, and they keep innovating. All of you keep thinking on how to make it more interesting, how to make it more useful. So that's very really really nice. And of course, about this particular sector, I think just like two things that I want to end with. It's very important to sort of identify in the first place what is the kind of work that you really like doing. And by work, I mean, do you like doing research? Do you like doing writing? Or do you like, maybe being on the implementing side? Because that helps a lot, once you figure that out, it's very easy to choose an organization, choose a role, because you sort of know about yourself, and that matters a lot. And of course, because considering the number of organizations that we have in this sector, do your research well. As in, do your understanding of all of these organizations, talk to people, understand the work they're doing, so that you don't end up just sort of landing anywhere and then getting disappointed with the sector. The sector is great. It's just that you have to really be careful in terms of where you join and what you do.
Chirag, you had something to share. Yeah.
So adding on to Ankita and Kavya, for me, I believe this sector has huge potential to grow and numerous opportunities. It's always about getting which opportunities matches your needs specifically, not your wants, but specifically your needs. And then you can build a good career option in this sector too. So that's just my final remarks about YIF Talks. This has been 2 years, but the last 2 days has been before 2 years. I'm not sure how to put it.
First assignments, writing our initial statements. Is it initial visions? I'm sorry. Yeah.
I would also like to thank YIF Talks team, because this is a really innovative platform that we are trying, and we'll also get to know about other industries in the future, hopefully as well. Chiming into what others also mentioned, I agree when others mentioned that the sector is going to grow in the future, and there are a lot of new opportunities and new roles which are coming up in the sector. And I would suggest everyone to keep following some of the organizations on their LinkedIn accounts, on their Instagram and other accounts, to just get to keep yourself updated with how the sector is doing, what are the new things that are coming up, and etc. etc. So yeah.
Also, thanks for stealing my thunder and my line here. But yes, we are definitely coming back. I mean, I can take this opportunity on behalf of YIF Talks to tell that this is not it, right? This is just a beginning where we thought of bringing in the development sector and folks working in it. Definitely, we're going to talk about the other industries as well. I had definitely had a lot of FOMO feels here. I want to talk about the corporate industry, guys. Come on. So similarly, we would definitely be talking about the other industries as well going forward. Just stay tuned and look out for our space. All of us would keep you posted about the same. I guess that should be it. Farhan, Shanmuka, or Deepak, can you just come on board? We just want to end it all together, Farhan did already come up. So Shanmuka, Deepak.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining in. And thank you to the panelists for agreeing and staying with us and sharing your experiences so graciously. Thanks a lot.
Oh, that was Shanmuka, by the way, who didn't show his face, but yes. Great. I guess we should. I mean, we are good to go. There are a couple of resources already shared on the chat, and a couple of other resources would also be sent across in order to strengthen your research and further your research in the sector and the other opportunities and exciting future opportunities that do come up. Also, all of them have been very generous in giving out their email IDs and their LinkedIn accounts. So you can definitely reach out to them with any specific or any industry specific or organization specific queries as well. And yes, Naman's organization is hiring, it seems, apparently. So yeah, you can definitely reach out to them if you're looking out for opportunities in the consulting space. Finally, thanks a lot, everyone. It has been wonderful hosting all of you along with the panelists right here. It was amazing, as usual, to discuss stuff with you. Like what Chirag has definitely mentioned, it was like a chai pe charcha kind of a concept that we got back through the almost 2 weeks of a preparation, 2 weeks of our initiation and thought processes, right? Thanks a lot for it. Collaboration starts right here with all of us, and that's what extends up to a greater extent as well. If there's any other specific questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. We'll be more than happy to answer them. And stay tuned to the YIF Talk space. We have more to come in the coming weeks as such. Thanks a lot, everyone. Please stay safe, and I hope everyone's keeping safe and sound. This was supposed to be my opening dialogue, but yes, nevertheless, please stay safe and take care of yourself and your close ones. Thanks a lot, and I guess that should be it. I can't thank anyone enough. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining, and yes, cheers. Good night, everyone.